I want you to imagine something for a second. You are rushing around your house in the morning,
Oh, we all know that feeling.
right? You've got your shoes in one hand, your coffee in the other, and you are just stressed because you know you have a meeting in exactly 20 minutes.
Pure panic mode.
Exactly. So you do that frantic split-second dart of the eyes up to the wall to see exactly how late you are. But instead of seeing a blaring 8:45 staring back at you, just judging you, the numbers are entirely gone.
Completely blank.
Yeah, you just see a message that simply says, Jesus loves us.
It's a completely jarring disruption to your normal morning routine.
Totally.
You're expecting hard data, and instead you are handed this, philosophical statement.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of source material today. It's a company manifesto and a product description for a very unique piece of home decor called the Jesus Clock.
It really is unique.
And what we are exploring here is how a simple, frankly radical design change to an everyday object is attempting to completely reframe our relationship with time and with stress and with spirituality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because taking the numbers off a clock and replacing them with a message of boundless love is a wild concept to try and implement in the real world.
It really is. It's the ultimate subversion of an object's primary purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, a clock is literally just for numbers.
Exactly. The text describes this physical product quite specifically. It is a traditional wall clock complete with hour and minute hands, but the phrase Jesus loves us replaces the 12 numbers around the dial.
Wow.
And the creators are very explicit in the text about what this is. They don't just call it a piece of decor or like a novelty item.
Right, they take it much more seriously than that.
They do. They define it as a faith-based emblem. They state that the clock is meant to transform ordinary moments into spiritual reflections. Right, and that immediately forces us to ask about the actual mechanics of this. Because I was reading this and I kept thinking about it like taking the speedometer out of your car.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You completely remove the numbers that tell you how fast you are going, and you just replace the whole dashboard dial with a sticker that says drive safe.
Which is a nice sentiment, but
But taking that analogy a step further, a car without a speedometer isn't just a philosophical statement, it's genuinely dangerous because you lose a critical measurement tool.
right.
So if the numbers are gone from this clock, does it still function as a timepiece, or does it cross the line into becoming pure symbolic art?
What's fascinating here is that tension between art and utility.
Yeah.
That's exactly where the creators are operating.
Okay, how so?
Well, to answer the functional question, the hands of the clock are still there. The clock still ticks. Time is still technically passing and being recorded.
So it is a real clock.
Yes. But the user's focus is forced to shift. The mechanism of the clock shifts your attention from the exact measurement of time right now to what the passing moment actually represents.
I see.
The creator's intent, as stated in the text, is to remind you that every moment is a testament to the boundless love that envelops us.
Wait, I have to stop you there because practically speaking, how am I getting the time?
Right.
If I'm rushing for that morning meeting we talked about and I look up at the wall and I get a message of boundless love, instead of knowing if it's 8:45 or 8:50, I am still going to be late.
You're still missing the train.
Exactly. If I end up missing my train, that's going to spike my cortisol, not give me a moment of serene joy.
Yeah.
A functional object that refuses to function seems like it would just create more anxiety.
That is a very valid critique of the design, and it requires us to look closer at how human beings actually read clocks.
Okay.
Because you don't necessarily need the printed number 9 to know it's 9 o'clock. You rely on spatial memory. You look at the angle of the hands.
Ah, I see. So you have to translate the geometry of the hands into the time yourself.
Exactly, and that translation takes an extra microsecond of cognitive processing.
Right, it's not instant anymore.
And that friction is the point. You are looking for a measurement of efficiency, but because the numbers are gone, your brain experiences a micropause.
Oh, wow.
In that tiny gap of cognitive friction where you are translating the angle of the hands, the design forces you to absorb the visual message, Jesus loves us.
That's incredibly clever.
They are hijacking that split-second act of checking the time that we all do, 100 times a day.
It's like a speed bump for your brain.
Yes, exactly.
You go in looking for a number to stress over, you hit this visual speed bump, and you are forced to process this larger philosophical idea, which brings us to the psychological problem that this text is explicitly trying to solve.
Right, the bigger context.
The manifesto paints a very specific picture of the world we live in. They describe it as a world incessantly racing forward.
which I think we can all relate to.
Oh, totally. Think about how many times you, as a listener, look at your phone screen just to check the time during a single meeting. We are all deeply conditioned to constantly measure our productivity against the passing minutes.
The contrast they draw in the text is incredibly sharp. They're setting up a dichotomy between the modern world, which they view as a chaotic high-speed blur, and their ultimate goal,
Which is what?
anchoring individuals in what they call the serene present. They envision this clock serving as a spiritual companion in churches, homes, and any faith-cherishing space.
They use those specific words.
Yes, spiritual companion. They even liken its presence to the glow of a lit candle or a comforting verse from the Bible.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Hmm.
That creates a massive paradox.
How so?
If they want to cure the anxiety of our incessantly racing forward world, why use a clock, the literal engine of that anxiety, to do it?
Right, it's counterintuitive.
Clocks are usually the ultimate source of our daily stress. They remind us of our deadlines, they tell us we haven't achieved enough today, they dictate the pace of the rush. Can a clock, the very symbol of modern pressure, truly be the cure for the anxiety it traditionally causes? Because, like you said earlier, they don't turn the clock off, it still ticks.
They keep the tick. And that is perhaps the most fascinating psychological claim in the entire document.
Why keep the sound of the stress?
Well, why keep the auditory reminder of time passing if you want to eliminate the stress of time? The answer is that the clock's tick is being psychologically repurposed by the creators.
Repurposed, okay.
In a normal environment, the tick of a clock is a countdown to a deadline. It's the sound of time running out. It triggers that low-level fight-or-flight response.
Right, since the Industrial Revolution, we've been trained that a ticking clock means hurry up.
But the text explains that they have redesigned this experience so that the tick acts as a gentle nudge. It's an attempt to completely reclaim time for the domain of anxiety and give it back to serenity.
Wow, so the sound itself means something different.
The text says they want to transform fleeting seconds into lasting reflections of faith and love. So instead of the tick meaning you are losing time, the creators want to train your brain so that the tick means you are existing in another moment of love.
It's a massive cognitive reframing tool disguised as a piece of plastic and metal on your wall.
Perfectly said.
They are trying to hack your stress response. You hear a tick, your cortisol spikes, but then you look at the clock, hit that visual speed bump we talked about, and the message overrides the auditory panic.
Yes, it intercepts the panic.
And the text gets really specific about the emotional states they are trying to trigger with this hack. They outline 4 core values that they want to engineer into the user's mindset: gratitude, calmness, joy, and faith.
And notice how they pair each of those abstract emotional states directly with the physical function of timekeeping.
What do you mean?
It is very deliberate. For gratitude, the text says they are encouraging a heart full of thanks with every passing second. For calmness, they want to promote a peaceful mind amidst life's continuous hustle.
Ah, I see.
They are taking the very mechanism of the hustle, the passing seconds, and using it as the delivery vehicle for calmness and gratitude.
It reminds me so much of modern mindfulness techniques. You
Yeah.
know, when people set a random alarm on their phone, and when it goes off, doesn't mean go to a meeting. It just means take a deep breath or think of something you are grateful for.
Yes, that's a very similar behavioral prompt.
But instead of an app on a phone that you have to actively program and interact with, this is built directly into the physical environment of your living room or your kitchen.
It's passive until you look at it.
But again, I have to play devil's advocate here. Can a static piece of decor truly spread positive vibes and happiness the way the text claims?
It's a fair question.
Human psychology is incredibly adaptable. Don't we eventually just become blind to the things we see every day?
You are referring to sensory adaptation, or what is sometimes called banner blindness in the digital world.
Right, banner blindness.
It happens when our brains filter out persistent, unchanging stimuli to save cognitive energy.
Exactly. I have a piece of art in my hallway that is beautiful, but I haven't genuinely looked at it in 3 years. It's just background noise now. Doesn't a clock with a static message just become invisible after a month?
That's the danger.
You would just stop reading the words, Jesus loves us, and only look at the hands.
That is a very real challenge for any static object, and it threatens the entire premise of their product. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, their reliance is on active intentionality.
Okay.
The phrase, every glance at our clock, is repeated and emphasized throughout the text. This isn't meant to be a passive decor that just sits there like a painting in a hallway.
So it's different because of the utility.
It is designed as an active environmental cue that is tied to a biological and social necessity.
Meaning, because you still need to know the time occasionally to function in society, you are forced to actively engage with the object.
Precisely. You can't become entirely blind to a clock because your daily routine requires you to reference it. The creators are attempting to build a classic habit loop.
A habit loop, like
Yeah.
in behavioral psychology.
Exactly. In behavioral psychology, a habit loop consists of a cue, a routine, and a reward. Here, the cue is your internal need to check the time, or maybe the auditory tick of the clock.
Right.
The routine is the physical act of looking at the wall and translating the angle of the hands.
But the reward is where they make the swap.
Yes.
Usually the reward is numerical data that allows you to plan your next move, which, often causes stress. Here, the reward is a visual interruption. It's a reminder of faith that breaks the autopilot of your daily hustle.
Yes. The text argues that this specific, repeated interruption fosters a strong foundation of faith with every single glance.
Because it happens so often.
Because you look at a clock multiple times a day, they are using the frequency of our time-checking habit to build a high-frequency habit of spiritual reflection. They are piggybacking on a behavior you already do effortlessly.
Okay, that makes the mechanics of it much clearer. We've explored the physical object, the psychological reframing of the tick, and how they are trying to leverage the habit loop of staring at the wall to overcome sensory adaptation.
Right.
But then we reach the promise and commitment sections of this manifesto, and the ambition of the text just scales up dramatically.
It really takes a turn.
The text claims this clock will inspire individuals to make choices rooted in positivity and truly realize their undeniable worth. And then it goes even further.
Beyond the individual.
It moves beyond the individual person looking at the clock and talks about fostering a community grounded in love and linking this clock to human unity through smiles shared, every laughter echoed, and every heartfelt gaze.
It is a remarkable escalation in scope.
So, what does this all mean? It's a massive leap in logic. To go from swapping numbers out on a plastic dial to claiming this will foster global human unity and shared laughter feels like incredibly ambitious marketing.
It does.
How do they actually justify that jump? Isn't that an impossibly heavy burden to place on a piece of home decor?
It certainly sounds utopian on the surface, but when you break down the underlying psychological theory of the source material, you can see the causal chain they are constructing.
Causal chain.
The creators view this clock not as the final solution to world peace, but as a mechanism for internal regulation. Think of it like resetting a breaker switch in your house.
Oh, okay, a breaker switch. How does that work in this context?
Well, when you are rushing, your brain's electrical system is basically overloaded with the current of panic and urgency. You are in a reactive state.
Sure, you're just putting out fires.
The clock acts as the switch that trips the breaker. It forces that micropause we discussed earlier. It stops the immediate current of panic by denying you the raw data that feeds it, and instead feeds you a stabilizing message of boundless love.
I see. So if the panic is switched off, the baseline of your emotional state resets.
Exactly.
You experience a micro moment of calm and gratitude instead of anxiety.
And that baseline shift is what powers the next phase. The text posits that if you are operating from a baseline of calm and gratitude, you will naturally begin to make choices anchored in positivity.
Yeah, so it changes your immediate practical behavior.
Right.
If I look at the wall and I am reminded to be present and grateful, rather than stressed about being 5 minutes late, I might not snap at my partner on the way out the door.
Exactly.
I might actually have the patience to hold the elevator for a neighbor.
Which perfectly explains their leap to the community level. If you are making positive choices and not projecting your time-induced stress onto others, you connect better with the human beings around you.
So it ripples out.
That is where the text brings in the smiles shared and the laughter echoed. The creators are arguing that the beautiful simplicity of life's every moment is the ultimate unifier.
Wow.
If an environmental cue can force you to recognize that simplicity, it can indirectly foster a community grounded in love. They are tracing a direct behavioral line from a single glance at a clock to the broad external interactions of a society.
That is a fascinating thesis on how our environment dictates our behavior. They are essentially arguing that we are the product of the tools we use to measure our lives.
That's a great way to put it.
If we measure our lives strictly in dwindling seconds and arbitrary deadlines, we become a society of anxious, disconnected people rushing past each other heads down.
Which is largely what we see today.
But if we measure our lives in moments of recognized love or spiritual reflection, our external reality changes to match that internal peace.
And that is the true core of their philosophy. The Jesus clock is merely the physical manifestation of an ideology that wants to wage a quiet war on the modern concept of rushing.
A quiet war on rushing. I love that.
They believe that empowering an individual to live with hope doesn't start with grand, sweeping life changes. It starts with controlling the smallest, most frequent, and most stressful inputs of their day.
It really makes you completely rethink the seemingly neutral, functional objects hanging on your walls or sitting on your desk right now.
It really does.
So let's take a step back and bring this all together for you, the listener.
It has been quite a journey, from a simple design tweak to a whole theory of social behavior.
We started with what sounded like a novelty, a literal look at a clock without numbers. But by unpacking the manifesto behind this product, we discovered a surprisingly deep design philosophy.
Deeply rooted in psychology.
We explored how the creators are attempting to reclaim our time from an incessantly racing world. They are taking the psychological trigger of a ticking clock, and instead of letting it fuel the daily hustle, they are trying to replace that anxiety with a constant, habit-looping reminder of faith, calm, and boundless love.
A total reframing.
We saw how they trace a path from a single serene glance at a wall dial to a micro-pause in cognitive processing, all the way to shared smiles, positive life choices, and human unity.
It is a powerful example of how much psychological weight we attach to functionality, and how intentionally disrupting that functionality can force a profound shift in perspective.
Now, before we wrap up, we want to give a quick reminder to you, the listener. Our goal today wasn't to take a stance on the religious elements or the theological claims of the source material.
No, not at all.
We always strive for impartiality. Our mission was simply to objectively explore the fascinating design philosophy presented in the text specifically, the idea of using an everyday object to intentionally shape human psychology and promote positive reflection.
And the mechanics of how they attempt to achieve that, leveraging habit loops and cognitive reframing, are undeniably interesting, regardless of your personal background.
Completely. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over today as you go back to your own incessantly racing world.
Something to think about.
We've just seen an argument for how redesigning a clock can theoretically change your entire mindset by forcing you to slow down. So think about your own living space. If the functional objects we surround ourselves with truly dictate our relationship with reality, what other highly stressful, efficiency-driven item in your home could be radically redesigned to prioritize your peace of mind over raw productivity?
It is a question worth taking the time to answer.
Catch you on the next deep dive.